You all hear me all right? You can hear me? Give me some hearts, please. Give me some hearts. Keep them coming if you can hear me. There's no wind today, so hopefully we'll be all right with the sound. Had some issues in the past. Kind of difficult to get in here today. Got the inauguration stuff going on all around here. Fences all put up, so they let me come inside the bollards today to film, which is a rarity. But yeah, this institution behind me here, you guys, this is called the United States Supreme Court. It's located at 1 First Street here in Washington, D.C. This is, of course, as we believe, the highest court in the land. You know, and we believe certain things about this court, such as that it's a court of discretion. We believe that this is the court of last resort. We come here when everything else has failed. There's nothing left to do but appeal to them. And yeah, that's true. That's true part of the time, but not all of the time. You guys, you know my argument. You know what I'm bringing up here, and that's that when a state chooses to become a party in a cause, the state cannot be judge in the cause, right? That's Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. See, the Constitution identified 2 different jurisdictions for this court behind me here. 2 different jurisdictions. One is original jurisdiction. The other is appellate jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction means that that's the court to act first, before any other court in the country. No other court in the country can act before the court that has original jurisdiction. It's the original court, right? So when original jurisdiction is identified, codified, enumerated, and assigned to as an obligation to the United States Supreme Court, then that obligation cannot be breached without breaching the Constitution. I mean, it's quite simple, you know. And we got to remember here, guys, that even acts of Congress cannot abridge the constitutional obligation. Congress doesn't have the authority to be able to alter, amend, or destroy the Constitution of the United States, because that must be done by an authentic act of people. So when the United States Supreme Court came out, the United States Congress came out in 1925 under the Judicial Reform Act and made this court behind me here a court of discretion, well, that can only be true and lawful so long as it doesn't abridge the Constitution, so long as it doesn't violate the Constitution. So this court can be a court of discretion. It can be a court of discretion so long as 2 instances are not in place. One is any foreign dignitary is named a party, or any state is named a party. If a state is named a party, then this court has exclusive personal jurisdiction because they have to act first. They are the court that acts first. No other court in the country can act before this court, right? And just as I've said numerous times, I mean, if we want to understand the rationale behind the United States Constitution, we'll typically go to the very people that wrote it, right? If we want to know the original intention of that document, then let's find out what they had to say. Because we have a court here that's an originalist court. They're a textualist court. They're looking for the original intent of the Constitution. This is a court that will actually make this decision if they are what they say that they are, if they believe what they say that they believe in, if they will do what they actually say that they will do. So, to find out the original intent of Article 3, Section 2, we can go to the author himself, James Madison. James Madison is considered the father of the Constitution. He wrote the Federalist Papers. Circular number 10, New York Packet, November 23rd, 1787. The article was titled "The Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection." And in that article, James Madison said, "No man is allowed to be judged in his own cause, because his interest would no doubt bias his judgment, and not improbably corrupt his integrity. With equal, nay, with greater reason, a body of men are unfit to be both judge and party at the same time." Now break that down, you guys. A body of men are unfit to be both judge and party at the same time. That sounds pretty clear to me, right? A body of men that make up the state cannot be both judge and party at the same time. That's why James Madison wrote Article 3, Section 2 in the manner which he did, which states, "In all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction." Body of men are unfit to be both judge and party at the same time. We can even go to the Supreme Court itself, right? Martin versus Hunter's Lessee, 1811, where the court said that state prejudices, biases, interest will sometimes obstruct the administration of justice by state judges. Therefore, it is the case and not the court that gives original jurisdiction to the United States Supreme Court. That was written by John Jay. right? One of the other drafters of the Federalist Papers, one of the other main drafters of the Constitution, our first Supreme Court Chief Justice, in fact. He said that it is the case and not the court that gives the United States Supreme Court original jurisdiction. And yet we've been led astray. We've been led to believe that this is only a court of last resort, that this is only an appellate court and not an original court. Well, unfortunately for them, the Constitution assigned the obligation. Constitutional obligations cannot be breached. They can't not be fulfilled. If they are, then that results in a public wronging, right? This court has a duty and obligation to oversee and hear every single case in which a state is a party first before any other court. That includes the courts of the state. If a state brings an accusation against you through one of its agents, it has no authority to be able to oversee the disposition of that dispute originally, because this court has been assigned it by the United States Constitution. Congress can't change that. Only the people can. So when Congress says that this is a court of discretion, it's only a court of discretion if the state is not named a party. But if a state is named a party, they don't have discretion, because they cannot breach a constitutional obligation through an abuse of discretionary authority. Even according to blacks, that any time a public officer abuses any discretionary authority with which they're invested in law, right, they commit 3 crimes. Right off the bat, these are per se crimes, meaning that we don't have to prove that they intended to breach it. Simply by virtue of the breach, all elements of crime have been met. That includes perjury, because they made a promise that they'd do something. They made a promise that they would do what the Constitution of the United States says that they would do, and they didn't do it. They didn't fulfill a promise, and they've already implicitly invited punishment should they fail to fulfill such a promise. The second crime is extortion, because they're compelling a result through illegal means, right? They're using their discretion abusively to bring about a desired result through illegal means. You can't breach a constitutional obligation. You can't break the law and then blame your discretion for it, or justify it through your discretion. That's an abuse of discretion, and that's a crime called extortion. The third crime is oppression, because they're applying the law unequally through to like members of the society. These people behind me here, unfortunately today, whether you willfully or negligently break the law as a public official, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because by the breach, all elements of the crime have already been met. Perjury is a violation of public trust, meaning that you cannot be trusted by the public because you didn't fulfill your promise. You didn't do what you said that you would do. You're not fulfilling the obligations that you have. You're not defending the one thing that you are instituted, constituted, and established to defend and protect. That's these people. And for 243 years, they have failed to do this. That's the basis of our litigation, guys. That's the reason why I'm here. That's the reason why I'm going out and I'm doing this. That's the reason why we've served 37 state attorney generals and 37 state Supreme Courts, is because this issue must get addressed. James Madison, when he wrote in the Federalist Papers, Circular number 10, that was the earliest known reference to the modern day concept of conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is when your interest, right, in the outcome will negate your unbiased nature. If I'm being sued by ABC attorneys and I walk into a courtroom and that judge works for ABC attorneys, what's the first thing that judge must do? He must recuse himself, because he has a conflict of interest. He works for the plaintiff. Same is said here. When the judge walks in the courtroom and he realizes he works for the state of Washington, and the state of Washington is a party in the cause, then why is he not recusing himself? What about the state of Texas, or the state of Connecticut, or the state of Michigan, the state of Wisconsin, the state of Oklahoma? Why are these judges continuing to act when there's a clear and definitive conflict of interest that's actually codified in not only the Constitution of the United States, but also in their own judicial code, Title 28, subsection 455? Because Title 28, subsection 455, which is the automatic recusal for judicial officers, what it states is that a judicial officer has a mandatory, self-executing, non-waivable duty to recuse themselves if they are an officer of either party. These are judicial officers of a state who just so happens to be a party in the cause. So we've got a massive amount of bias within the system, and then we wonder where that bias comes from. This bias was addressed by James Madison, it was addressed by Benjamin Franklin, it was addressed by Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, it was addressed by the framers of the Constitution, and yet we've been led astray by the United States Congress telling us that, that the only way that we could petition this court is through a writ of certiorari. Because remember, a writ of certiorari is a request to review a lower court's decision. If you have to petition this court, and the only way that you can do it is through a request to review a lower court's decision, then what you're saying to this court is that there's already a decision that's in place. You're incapable or unable to invoke original jurisdiction to this court if the only way to petition this court is through a writ of certiorari. That was a deceptive act by the United States Congress to make us forget about this court's original jurisdiction, to prevent us from being able to invoke the very right that we have to tell this court, not ask it, but tell it, that you must hear our case because you have an obligation to do so. The Constitution has assigned this obligation to you, and if you fail or refuse to do it, then you're refusing to obey the Constitution, which is an act, of course, of treason. Because any person who swears an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America and then refuses to recognize and enforce the body of laws governing this nation is, in fact, a traitor. They have committed the crime of treason. These justices don't have the authority to say, no, we're not going to hear a case if a state is a party in that cause. That's where the voiding of these judgments come from. That's the heart of this argument, is that when a court acts without jurisdiction, personal or subject matter, then what is produced is void. Void. It's not valid, it's void. There's no case to review. There's nothing to appeal because that judgment is void. And any judgment that's void is void on the onset, as though it never even existed. This derives from Civil Rule 60b-4. Now, Civil Rule 60b-4, that one in particular, Civil Rule 60 talks about the voiding and nullification judgments, the appeal process or the voiding process. And what it says that a judgment is either valid or void. It can't be anything else. It's either valid or void. It can't be anything but valid or void. And it's void, or it's valid in all instances except for when the court that renders the decision lacks either subject matter jurisdiction or personal jurisdiction. If the court lacks either one of those two things, then it is a void judgment, and a void judgment is always forever void. It can never become valid because a court can never obtain jurisdiction when it lacks jurisdiction. Remember, you guys, jurisdiction is created by the Constitution. The Constitution is created by the people, right? And then that jurisdiction creates the court. And then that court creates the court official or the agent. Therefore, the agent is the lowest on the totem pole. The people are the highest. Judges aren't above us, they're below us, because they were created by us through multiple layers. So it says that a judgment is either valid or void. It's valid in all instances, except for when the court rendered a decision lacks either subject matter jurisdiction or personal jurisdiction. If it lacks either one of those two things, it's a void judgment. And a void judgment, again, is always in forever void. It can never become valid because no court can obtain jurisdiction if it lacks jurisdiction. Jurisdiction can never be waived because the first duty to that court, the state court, the circuit court, the district court, doesn't matter what court it is. What grants the court the authority to be able to be a court and oversee the parties involved in a dispute is jurisdiction. Absent jurisdiction, that court has no authority to do anything. It's not a court. And therefore, any decisions that it renders, any action that it takes are fully without force or effect because they came without lawful authority. See, in order for a court to render a legally binding decision, it must have two things. It must have subject matter jurisdiction and it must have personal jurisdiction. If it lacks either one of these two things, it is void, right? Because the court had no authority to be able to do what it did, right? It had no lawful authority to be a court, call you in. Now, subject matter jurisdiction is the right to oversee the type of case that's brought before it, right? The type of case that's brought before it. So, for instance, in the case of a death, you would not bring that to a small claims court because that court would not have subject matter jurisdiction to oversee the disposition of deceased assets. You'd bring that to a probate court. That would be the correct court that would have subject matter jurisdiction to deal with the disposition of the deceased assets. Now, the second thing it must have is personal jurisdiction. And personal jurisdiction is the right to oversee the parties involved in dispute. The right to oversee the parties involved in dispute. So when the Constitution of the United States of America, Article 3, Section 2 says, in all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, then that means that this court behind me here is the only court that has the authority to oversee first any case in which a state is a party. No other court can do it first, because this is the original court. That's the original jurisdiction. Therefore, this court behind me is the only court that has the authority to oversee the parties involved in a dispute if a state is named a party. And it doesn't matter whether they're named petitioner or respondent. If they're named a party, this is the only court that has jurisdictional authority, personal jurisdiction, to oversee that particular case. Which means that if another court acts first, then what it's produced is void, completely without force or effect on the parties involved in the dispute, because that judgment was entered into by a court that had no authority to be able to enter the judgment. They had no authority to be able to oversee that particular dispute. And when you look at a judge in particular, and the judge's duty and obligation to recuse themselves because they don't have jurisdiction, according to Title 28, subsection 455, a judge must do that. It is mandatory, non-waivable, self-executing. You don't have to ask them to do it. They got to do it on their own. A state judge must obey the Constitution, because the judges in every state are bound thereby anything in the Constitution or laws of any state contrary notwithstanding. So if a state judge fails to recognize that his authority is gone the moment that he takes action in a case in which his boss is a party, in which he works for the plaintiff, he doesn't recognize the self-executing duty to recuse himself because of the conflict of interest that exists, then what he produces is nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's void. Completely without force or effect on the parties involved in a dispute, because you can't grant the court jurisdiction because the jurisdiction existed before you were called into that courtroom, meaning that jurisdiction comes before anybody can waive it. Before the court can call anybody in, jurisdiction must be established. And if it doesn't exist, if it's not lawful, then nothing that they do is lawful. If they bring you into a courtroom by arresting you through force, intimidation, threats, duress, just because you're in that courtroom doesn't grant that court jurisdiction, because that jurisdiction existed before your arrest. The authority for that court to take any action whatsoever exists long before you even committed a crime, long before you were even born. Article 3, Section 2 has never been changed. Never. If this court wants to only be a court of appellate jurisdiction, if they feel as though the workload would be too great, that's fine. Present your case to the people of the United States. Tell them why you're incapable of doing what you're obligated and constitutionally required to do, and let the people decide. But if in the opinion of the people of the United States, any of the provisions or guarantees of the Constitution being in particularly wrong, then let it be corrected by an amendment in the way in which the Constitution so designates. Until if when that time comes, every single person is entitled to every single right secured by and enumerated in the Constitution, regardless of where they choose to reside and regardless of what that court is or who is overseeing that court. Constitutional obligations must be performed. Otherwise, what they produce is unconstitutional. We've got 2.9 million people that are currently sitting in prison. Not just state prisons, but federal prisons as well. Because remember, federal judicial officers are absolutely required to abide by Title 28, subsection 455. Every single federal judge must obey Title 28, subsection 455. There's no denying that. This court would not counter that. No U.S. attorney would debate that with me. Every single federal judge must comply with Title 28, subsection 455. And those are judicial officers of the United States of America when the United States of America is a party in the cause. Remember what 455 says, that a judicial officer has an automatic, mandatory, non-waivable, self-executing duty to recuse themselves if they are an officer of either party. It doesn't matter if it's the United States of America or it's a state. If you're an officer of either party, you have a mandatory, self-executing, non-waivable duty to recuse yourself. And anytime that a person breaches a duty or an obligation, they have thus broken the law, because that's all the law is. Law establishes obligations. Constitution is a law. It creates obligations of government. And when those obligations are not followed, when they're not performed, now you have broken the law. There isn't a single judicial officer in the United States of America today that has not committed perjury. Not one. Not one. We brought this to their attention. I've went around and I've served all of the state Supreme Courts. I've served all of the state attorney generals. I've served the United States Attorney General. We've served all the congressmen, all the senators. We brought this to their attention, and yet they're permitting it to continue. This is why this is the moment of truth. This is why we're at a point where either this court behind me takes action and does what they're lawfully constituted and obligated to do in accordance with the will of the people, or they will destroy this institution themselves. This destruction is on their hands. It's not on anyone else's hands. It's on theirs, and theirs alone. Because we've appealed to their good nature. We've notified them of the criminality of their agents. We've shown them that their negligence is resulting in continued criminal acts being committed by every single judicial officer across the country. This court knows what I'm doing. This court is fully familiar. I've submitted the writ. They had it. They're aware of it. They're talking about it. You don't go around the country and serve 37 state attorney generals and 37 state Supreme Courts and not have them know who you are. We have federal law enforcement officers that are going to the post office in Kansas and the post office in Missouri asking questions about us peaceably assembling to petition the government for redress of grievances. That means that they know about this, and yet they're not taking action to mitigate their culpability in the issue. They can get out of this very, very easily, right? We don't want this to be destructive, but it's going to have to happen very, very quickly, because the criminality of this court is leading to the continued oppression and destruction of our country, the harming of our fellow countrymen, the destruction of families, the robbing of children, money, property, lives. And we can't permit this to continue. Can't permit it to continue. So today, there's more than 700,000 people that are currently imprisoned across America on direct facial constitutional violations. Direct facial constitutional violations. That's the low-hanging fruit. Those are the easy ones. If you are in prison, or if you have been charged with, if you've been convicted of a crime by the United States justice system or systems subjected to the jurisdiction thereof, your judgment's void. It's completely without force or effect. But we got to make this institution behind me understand that they have failed to fulfill the one obligation that they're constituted to do, to fulfill their duties as the court of original jurisdiction whenever a state is a party in cause. And if they don't want to do that, then that's okay. That's okay, because what that will mean is that we don't live in a union. That would mean that this court right here behind me has no power. It's not the supreme anything. That would mean that 9 justices can go home and brush up their resumes and go get a job at Burger King because they have no purpose, because they were nothing but liars, and they're not able to do the things that they say that they can do. They don't have the power that they say that they have. And we can stop this delusion that they are creating and telling everybody, that they will do something and that they'll act lawfully, that they will defend this country, that they'll support and the Constitution of the United States. We need to know that. We need to know that. If what the American people believe in is not true, then awesome. 9 justices, tell the American people that it's not true. Tell the American people that you guys are just nothing but a facade, that you can't do the things that you say you can do, that you have no power to be able to control these local governments, and that your rulings are nothing but a bunch of noise that have no power, force, or effect, and leave us to have to deal with this with the state courts. Let us deal with the tyranny and oppression at the state level. If you don't have the power to be able to do what you say you can do, to preserve the union and defend the one thing that makes the union, the one thing that was created, that your institution was created to do, if you can't do that, then just let the American people know that. Let them know. The Constitution is nothing, that we are going to operate in a completely arbitrary and capricious manner, that we have 50 sovereign regional governments that can act however they want, and let the people of the United States decide if that's the reality that they want to live in. But that decision is also going to affect everybody across the street here at the Capitol. That decision is going to affect that building over there, the Senator building, and that building over there, the Congress building, right? That's going to affect this entire city, because that would mean that they don't exist either. Supreme Court, the ramifications of your decision is going to pretty much destroy this entire area here, because this is all just a delusion. This place doesn't have the power that we say that it has. So if that's true, Supreme Court, then great. But here's the problem that you're going to have here, okay? The problem is that I've delivered this to you. We've given you ample opportunity to be able to decide which side you want to be on. We've drawn the line in the sand. We've shown you what your obligations are. You're clearly operating outside of them, which is unconstitutional. It's unlawful. It's lawlessness. And so everything that you guys have done has been criminal in nature because it's been in violation of the law. So you're going to need to tell the American people that one as well. You're going to need to let them know that also. So this is a pretty difficult thing for you to do, Supreme Court. I get that. I understand. But you don't get to continue to ignore something that's in your face and pretend like it's not happening simply because you don't want to own up to the lies, the ignorance, or the intentional deception that your institution has put forward for 243 years. This institution was founded upon slavery. When we consider the origins of this institution, right, we can understand that if you have a Juris Doctorate, if you have a degree that makes a person into a criminal, and the 13th Amendment equates and makes synonymous the term prisoner and criminal, prisoner and slave, they are the same thing. They mean the same thing according to this institution behind me here. Then if you have a degree that makes a person into a criminal, you have a degree in slavery. That's all it is. So we don't subscribe to the racial discourse that you guys are putting forward. We don't subscribe to the economic discourse that you guys are putting forward. We don't subscribe to the breakdown and destruction of the one thing that we love and believe in, the one thing that you were instituted to preserve, protect, and defend. We don't subscribe to that. The American people don't. So it is going to be a very difficult decision for you. But you either let the people know that you are what you are, and you step up, you assert your supremacy, you make all of the state courts that work for you obey your edict and obey the very laws that you must obey. And if you don't, then you're going to have to tell the people that you're nothing but traitors, nothing but slave owners. Because all these slaves that you have taken into your custody, those slaves are being held against their will, without any lawful authority. Because you didn't follow the one thing that you had to follow to put them into an enslaved condition. And that's a difficult decision, I know. You guys are going to have to say that everything that you've done your entire career has been without force or effect. Everything that your predecessors have done their entire careers have been without force or effect, because you guys have claimed to be experts in the law, and yet you never followed the law. That's not an expert in the law, that's a criminal. That's all that is, it's a criminal. And we don't honor criminals. No one in this country is going to continue to honor you, but you do have an opportunity to mitigate your culpability within this. You do have an opportunity to do the right thing, and that is to step up and tell the truth. The truth will not hurt you. It will not hurt you, because the truth is the first step to reconciliation. The truth is the first step in healing a divided nation that you divided. That's the first step. But if you don't have the courage or the fortitude or the willingness to step up and tell the truth, then by your lack of truth, you're a liar and you're a criminal. The whole world's going to know, regardless of what you choose to do here, Supreme Court. The whole world's going to know. Because the law is on our side. It's not on your side. We've shown you what the law states. We've shown you that you are clearly operating outside of that law. We've shown you that your actions are unlawful, which makes you a criminal, which makes you a traitor. We've shown you that. So you can ignore it all you want. You can pretend like nothing's going on. You can do that. But any unrebutted accusation is an admission, government. Any unrebutted accusation is admission, Supreme Court justices. And by your ignorance right now, by your unwillingness to listen to us and let me present this debate, you're proving that you guys are guilty. Because I already know that you guys do not want to debate an issue that you know you're going to lose on. It's a big decision. I get it. It's a big decision. But it's a decision you're going to have to make. There's no way out of this. There's enough people now that are fully aware of what's going on, Mr. Thomas. There's enough people now that are fully aware of what's going on, Mr. Roberts, Ms. Barrett, Ms. Brown, Ms. Sotomayor, Mr. Alito, Mr. Kavanaugh, Mr. Gorsuch. There's enough people that are aware of this truth that this is not going to be put back in the dark. You're going to have to address this, because standing behind me are now 2.9 million people, and they're all aware of this. Standing behind you are 40,000 criminals. Who do you think is going to win here? Who do you think is going to win? 40,000 slaves that you have illegally and unlawfully imprisoned because you failed to fulfill the obligations that you have constitutionally codified and enumerated? Or your 40,000 criminals? I think that what stands in front of me has no power compared to what stands behind you has no power against what stands behind me. These people are going to push me into your court whether you like it or not. These people are going to allow me to debate you on this regardless of whether you listen or not, because the battle is fought in the opinion of the public. And I've said numerous times that for me, your silence actually is not a detriment, it's an advantage. Because for the last year, I've controlled the narrative. I've been back and forth across this country 18 times over 19 months, telling the people of the United States about these issues, sowing the seeds of justice, so that it'll actually reach a point of harvest. The people know about this, and it's going to continue to spread. And as of today, I'm going to tell you that this is about to spread worlds faster than you could ever begin to control. If you want to consider a wildfire, let's just say that this whole country just lit on fire today. Because this isn't our battle. This is God's battle. And God controls the flow of the information. And He's letting this information go today. So I'm going to stand here right now. Guys, there's something known as a divine sanction guarantee. And when you're against a superior force that are refusing to fulfill the obligations that they have by violating the oaths that they made, you invoke the divine sanction guarantee. This guarantee has been invoked one other time in the history of our country. It was in the Declaration of Independence. But Thomas Jefferson made a huge error in what he invoked, because he only invoked justice. He didn't invoke the other half. Go and read the Declaration of Independence, you guys. Because at the end, Thomas Jefferson said that he's calling upon the just God for all the good people of this nation. But today I'm going to invoke another divine sanction guarantee for the second time. I'm going to call upon the just God and supreme judge of the world on behalf of all the good people of this nation whose rights and freedoms have been robbed from them by this government. We're now going to move forward with this week. Whether they hear us or not, we have everything in place. We have everything done. And the decision is going to be up to them. Do they want destruction on their hands? Do they want to vote themselves out of a job, out of an institution?
No, I really want to see. Yeah.
Or do they just want to tell the truth? Because I promise you, the American people are forgiving. I promise you, Supreme Court justices, that the American people will understand that you've been led astray just as much as they were led astray. And we can come together peacefully as a nation to work together to figure out how we're going to move forward consistent with the supreme law of the land. But that's going to require your truth. It's going to require your courage, Supreme Court. And if you're unable to do that this week, then destruction is on your hands. And I promise you that the first 9 people that are going to be going to the gallows will be right behind me. Because the American people might be forgiving, but we're also not docile. You can only push us so far. You can only steal from us for so long. You can only rob from us for so long before we're going to take action against the traitors that are destroying that which we love. And we're lawfully able to do this. Our laws permit anything that would be necessary to remove traitors from a position of honor who are not honorable. So I'm going to ask you, Thomas, to do the honorable thing right now. I'm going to ask you. I know you're watching this. I know that there's Secret Service and FBI dossiers on me. I know that there's people around here that are watching me right now. Step up. Discharge the duties of your office. Fulfill the obligations and promises that you made to the people of the United States, and sign the writ that was delivered to you on September 29, 2023 under the case Tano M. Downey versus State of Washington. Do that. Retire into obscurity to never be heard from again, and save this country from the destruction that your own institution has created. Thank you guys so much for everything you've done. Thank you guys for following me. Thank you guys for being with me throughout this entire journey. But we're almost home. We're almost home. My faith tells me that we got an honorable justice in here that's going to do the right thing. And they're listening right now. They're going to do the right thing. And we're going to get the outcome that we're praying for. We're going to get the outcome that we're entitled to, because they're going to act consistent with their obligations. They're going to act consistent with what is in the best interest of this institution, and they're going to preserve the Constitution of the United States of America. Thank you guys so much. Okay? Please continue to like, follow, share. Please donate if you can. We need a lot of support right now. We're going into the last week here. Last week, the moment of truth. So again, brothers and sisters, 700,000 people currently imprisoned across America on direct facial constitutional violations. We're going to get you home. Those brothers and sisters that are 2.9 million people whose judges had no authority to oversee the disposition of that dispute, we're going to get you home to your families. Okay? We're going to get you the love and support you need to heal through traumatic experiences that this institution has brought on you. I promise you, I give you my word. I'm a man of my word. We're almost done. We're at the last stage right now. So we're going to get America out of the slavery institution once for all. We're going to, through judicial fiat, destroy the 13th Amendment without it being a legislative stumble block. We're going to make sure that the laws that set free no longer enslave. The billions of dollars these states are making off the forced involuntary servitude are the weakest, most vulnerable in our society. Our brothers and sisters is no longer going to exist. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall ever exist within the jurisdiction of the United States. I promise you. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day, okay? God bless.